This is how Prime Minister Modi described Rajya Sabha's passing of the farm bills. Those aimed at scaling India's farming practices by ultimately crippling the farmers' protections and potentially their livelihood. But the real watershed moment was one of civic, cultural, and historical significance. It was the start of the largest protest of the 21st century, one that would compromise 250 million people globally. Let's take a look at some fast facts.
Please, the bill is passed.
The Indian states of Punjab and Haryana borders will be sealed.
Over 40 farmers' unions participated in the protests, with Samyukta Kisan Morcha leading the unions, followed by the Bharatiya Kisan Union and the Kisan Majdoor Sangharsh Committee. While definite numbers have yet to be released, it is said that millions joined the protests in India alone. Hundreds of fatalities occurred during the 1-year duration of the protests. The protests kicked off in 2020 and ended with the repealing of the farm bills in November of 2021. Though MSP guarantees are still quite contentious. So much has been published, reported, tweeted, and posted about the farmers' protests. But many of the facts often get lost in the noise. At a base level, the 2020 farmers' protest is the largest of our lifetime. The protests were widespread, with major participation from Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, and Punjab, with the latter of the three leading in numbers and bringing the loudest voices. Because 75% of Punjab's population relies on agriculture for income, Punjabi farmers came out in droves to protest for the farm bills. Also known as India's breadbasket, the state of Punjab had a vested interest in agricultural protections. And because 80 to 95% of Punjab's agricultural land is owned by the Jat Sikh community, many of the ensuing acts of protests became layered in both religious solidarity and political dissent. While smaller regional protests did take place as early as August of 2020, the September passing of the farm bills, the Samyukta Kisan Morcha mobilized all the major union groups and their umbrella organizations for the Delhi Chalo movement, a large-scale march on the capital. The Delhi Chalo movement began in November of 2020, when large contingents of farmers from all over the nation descended upon the capital and set up protest camps in Singhu, Tikri, and Ghazipur, three key border points surrounding Delhi. Over the course of an entire year, these three cities became semi-permanent encampments. In particular, a 1.2-mile stretch of the Delhi-Meerut Expressway from Ghazipur to the capital was converted into a roughly 10,000-person makeshift village, complete with tents for housing, food, supplies, a medical department, communal meeting spaces, laundry facilities, a library, and even a schoolhouse run by volunteers. This wasn't simply a march on the capital. This was an organized movement from India's heartland. Despite facing sub-zero winter temperatures, clashes with local, state, and federal law enforcements, and government-sanctioned restrictions on internet access, farmers powered on. In one instance, 26-year-old Jagjit Singh from Bijnor used his tractor to bring 10,000 gallons of fresh water to Ghazipur camp every single day. This was used for drinking, bathing, cooking, and cleaning. In another instance, Kuldeep Singh, a 36-year-old farmer from Punjab, prepared daily meals for the protests, while his family covered his day-to-day duties back home. To him, running the family farm and feeding the protesters were of equal importance. Yet another volunteer, Himanshi Rana, ran the Ghazipur camp's medical tents, which mostly tended to the wounds of those who were hit by tear gas during the Republic Day tractor rally. a key turning point in the Delhi Chalo movement. On 26 January 2021, the protesters conducted a tractor rally to Delhi's historic Red Fort. Met with military force, tear gas, and batons, the demonstrators maintained their rights to protest and marched on. Once again, they made it known they were here to stay until their demands were heard. As the government's response, the farmers' protests took a turn for the violent. The rhetoric around the protests too changed. We know that many of the protesting farmers hail from Punjab. This gave the protest a strong Sikh identity, though the movement of course remained in the interest of all farmers from all backgrounds. As is a norm for any large gatherings where Sikhs are present, Langar Seva, the Sikh tradition of free vegetarian community kitchens, became an instrumental part of feeding the thousands of protesters in the encampments. Sikh volunteers from all over the country, including those who weren't farmers, showed up simply because there was a need for volunteers, food, and communal kitchens. Because Sikhs were such a visible part of the protests, due part of their physical identity, some government supporters attempted to portray the protests as led by Sikh separatists, a patently false accusation that turned into a propaganda tool in dividing the public sentiments about the protests. This is why it's so important to know what the farmers' protest is rooted in. It is why it's crucial to understand the laws proposed, the impact on Indian farmers, and the grassroots organizing it took to bring their voices to light. It has been so easy, so convenient, so lazy to build the farmers' protest as a Sikh separatist movement, simply because scapegoating is easier than taking accountability, then educating ourselves on the socio-economic impact of scrappy laws, the hurried and haphazard attempt at capitalizing on India's most marginalized and undeserved economic contributors. My attempt in this series has been to educate you all on the root of the protests. Indian farmers' humble desire to have their voices heard in passing the laws that impact every level of their respective identities. A request for the unions to have a seat at the table in drawing bills that not only expand India's farming output, but also reward its farmers with livelihood and the ability to sustain a living wage. The protests brought the farmers' voices to a global platform. At one point, celebrities like Rihanna and Lily Singh tweeted out in support of the farmers. Climate activist Greta Thunberg published a toolkit to aid the protesters. Meena Harris, niece of US Vice President Kamala Harris, called out the violent military actions against the protesting farmers. With rallies breaking out all over India, in the Twitter sphere, and even parts of Montreal and Toronto, the Delhi Chalo movement soon garnered major global interests from all Indian diaspora, specifically Indians who traced their roots to the heartland's agriculture. In November of 2021, in as yet unprecedented move, the government relented and repealed the farm bills, though some portions of the bills have remained and are being contested once again.